Welcome to my positive failed VBAC birth story. Our daughter was born on December 7th, which is 6 weeks ago now, so that's really crazy. I didn't do a birth story with my first, but her birth was largely impacted by his birth, so I figure I go over the way his birth went down first, and it was crazy wild ride. It was 40 hours of labor, and I was over 40 weeks. I think I was 40 weeks in 2 days when I actually went into labor with him, and it was just really long. It was really long and really brutal. My goal with his birth was to have a totally unmedicated vaginal birth, and that did not happen. After, who knows, I don't even know the times anymore, but after like 20 hours of labor, maybe it was 25 hours of labor, I had gone into the hospital. When they tell you to go in at 4:11, which means your contractions are about 4 minutes apart, they're lasting 1 minute in length, and it's going like that for about an hour. That's when they say, hey, you should come into the hospital. So we did that with my son, and then when I got there, they did a cervical check. I was only 1.5 centimeters dilated. At my hospital, you have to be 5 centimeters just to be admitted. And in case you don't know, you don't give birth until you're about 10 centimeters dilated. So I had a very long ways to go, but my contractions were already pretty intense. We labored there at the hospital for just a little bit in the triage room, which is like a tiny little closet basically, and that was like not fun. So then we went home. So we did, and labored, I don't even know how long, maybe another couple of hours, and then we went back to the hospital because my contractions were a lot closer and they were so intense. And I think I was maybe at a 3 centimeters. I think I remember one of the midwives saying that, or one of the nurses saying that like she was gonna lie about how dilated I was so that I could be admitted so we didn't have to drive home because my house is 30 minutes away from the hospital. Then we were in the hospital for a while, and by that point I had already gotten, I think, fentanyl and maybe one other thing because I was so dead tired. After you are in labor for that long, oh my gosh, I was so silly. With his birth, as soon as I was in labor with him, which was like 7 in the morning, I remember feeling the first contraction when I was laying in bed and being like, oh, is that labor? After that, I was like, I'm gonna like get things going, and I decided to go on a hike. It wasn't a crazy hike, but why? I look back at that and I'm like, dude, that was probably the worst decision you could have ever made and may have contributed to you losing energy so quickly throughout labor. So, piece of advice, when you go into labor, don't worry about speeding it all up. Go to a coffee shop, something really chill, and reserve your energy. Like, you don't have to lay on the couch and just nap the whole time because that's like likely not gonna happen anyways because you're excited. Don't go on a hike. Just don't go on a hike. So anyways, I was really, really tired after, I don't know, 25 hours of labor, and that's kind of when a lot of women will end up getting what is considered an intervention. They offer you something to help you sleep, to help the contractions ease a little bit, blah, blah, blah. I ended up doing it. And it just all led to me getting an epidural. After I got the epidural, I was on it for another, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours, and I never dilated any more than 5 centimeters. After 40 hours of labor, never past 5, and it was the most disheartening thing. Like, I just remember after however many cervical checks I got, it was just there, like, every time the midwife was like, I don't know why you're still at a 5, but you are still barely at a 5. I had a doula. I had the most incredible doula with me. I had Cole, my husband, who was basically doula 2.0, like just the strongest birth partner I ever could have had with me. And everybody there was just like, we have no idea what's going on, like why your body is not progressing. So they offered a C-section, and at first I was like, that's the last thing I want, of all of it. Like, I didn't get my unmedicated birth. I have to get my vaginal birth. Like, I just have to. I'm just going to keep holding out. Kept holding out. I remember praying about it with my doula and with my husband, and it was a really, I don't know, it was just like one of the most memorable moments of birth. And if you've given birth before, but if you haven't, after just a couple of weeks, a lot of the details about birth are you like totally forget about it. It's kind of crazy, and I think it's the Lord's way of helping us forget the pain of labor and and that kind of stuff, because I think back and I'm already like, oh, I could give birth again in a couple of months, sure. Even though it's like the most intense physical thing, it's also the most intense mental thing. And this is just a part of Owen's birth that I remember so much, is just that prayer that we said that was just like, Lord, would you do with this birth as you will, and just help us submit to that and keep me safe and all this stuff. And so we decided to do the C-section. So my son was born via C-section on December 30th. This little girlie was born December 7th, almost exactly 2 years later. So now I'll talk about her birth. Just in case you don't know, VBAC stands for vaginal birth after cesarean. So the reason that my son's birth matters so much for her birth is because I was really trying to go for a vaginal birth, because with my son, he was a C-section. I feel like that was a really repetitive way to put it, but that's what it was. Before my daughter was born, I did a crazy amount of birth prep. I don't know, maybe it wasn't crazy. It feels like it was a crazy amount of birth prep. I was doing some stretches, I was doing flipping babies, I was sitting on a birth ball and doing a lot of like hip rotations and circles and all that kind of stuff. I had like really intentional posture, because that can really affect the position of your baby once you're giving birth. And I also did a birth course with Bridget, I don't ever know how to say her last name, Bridget Tyler or Bridget Taylor, and I loved it. I felt so sure that I was gonna get a vaginal birth. I was like, there's no way I won't. But around 10 a.m. on December 6th, I stopped working at my job on December 5th, and then I had one full day before I went into labor to like get ready for everything, so that was funny. At 10 a.m. I was driving to my friend's house to go hang out with her, to bring our little toddler boys together and have a good time and play. And I just remember like having some contractions, and I had a couple of light contractions a couple days before for, I don't know, 20 minutes to an hour. So I wasn't sure if this was like true labor or not. So I just kind of like went with it and didn't think much about it. And then as we were hanging out at their house, I was like, okay, these are like, seem like they're maybe getting closer and a little bit stronger. So after a couple of hours, I was like, I think I'm gonna go home. Oh, actually, that's so funny. I have in my notes list, I totally forgot about this. At 2 p.m., I had one of my prenatal appointments. So I went to the doctor for my prenatal appointment, and I remember them saying like, have you had any contractions? And I was like, actually, yeah, I think I might be in labor right now. And they were like, okay, well, go home. I don't even know why I went. I think it was just like, I might as well, because then if I wasn't actually in labor and I'd have to reschedule the appointment, that'd be a huge pain. So I just went. And then I went back home. Right around 5:30 in the evening is when they were ramping up like a good amount. I remember feeling a little bit more back labor again. I forgot to say, when Owen was born, he was sunny side up. So when you give birth, your baby is supposed to be obviously head down, but they're also supposed to be facing your back. That's the like most optimal position to give birth in for your baby, for yourself. Owen was born facing forward, facing upwards, and kind of cockeyed in here like this. I remember the doctors telling me when they opened me up, he was kind of just like staring at him like this. When they're facing up, you can get really intense back labor. So I don't know, to me, contractions kind of feel like really intense period cramps is like the best way I can put it. But when you have back labor, it's like really, really intense period cramps in your back. Around 7, my husband put our son down for bed. And around 7:30 is when I was like, okay, this is a lot. They were getting a lot more intense. They were just a couple minutes apart. And I was feeling like really into it, but I was still really hopeful. And then I have on my notes list that around 10 p.m. is when we went to the hospital the first time. We called my sister-in-law and her husband over to stay at our house while we went to the hospital. So they came over, they prayed with us. It was really, really sweet. And then we were like, okay, we're out of here. Like, I think I might need to feed this girl. We were trying to stay home in labor as long as we could, just because when you're like in your environment and you're calm and comfortable, your body typically is better about, going through labor and progressing. And birth is so physical, like the most intense physical feat you will ever experience as a woman, I think. But it's also so much of a mental game. I would argue, at least for myself, it's more mental than it was physical. So I was feeling really good about my contractions, and I was like taking them in waves and like breathing through them and praying through them and all this stuff. And so I felt really good about it. We got to the hospital around 10 p.m. She checked my cervix. I was only 1.5 centimeters dilated. And at that moment, I like just for a split second was like, I give up. I give up. Just give me the C-section now. I quit. But the nurse was like, you're 90% effaced, so that's really great progress. Stay here for a couple hours, see if you dilate anymore. So we stayed in that triage room again for 2 more hours until midnight. She checked my cervix again. I was only 1.5 centimeters, so no progress there. And I just remember I remember kind of losing it mentally a little bit. And my husband recognized that. And so I really feel like in that moment he grounded me and he was like, hey, we are going to go home. We're just going to drive home. The drive home is tough, but we'll make it. And we're going to labor there and you're going to try to sleep a little bit. And then we're going to come back when you're ready. And he kind of just made that decision. And I was like really grateful looking back that he just made that decision for us, because I was considering like trying to labor in that triage room for another few hours, which is like a tiny, very uncomfortable room that I just don't think you should be in for that long. So we drove home. Once we got home, I remember really trying to like hone in on my body and trying to slow down the contractions. And I remember praying and asking the Lord, like, would you help these slow down so that I can sleep in between my contractions? Because when they're every 2 or 3 minutes apart, it's very hard to sleep for 2 or 3 minutes, though you literally can, which is crazy. The Lord slowed my contractions down and my body slowed down, and some of them were like 10 minutes apart at that point. And so I was just laying in bed on all fours. I told Cole to go lay down too, and he was gonna sleep because last time was a lot for him too. So he went to sleep. And then when I did feel like I had a little bit more energy, I got up and I had some more contractions in the shower, which was incredible. I tried the bath with my son and I really didn't like it. People really talk up like water births and that kind of thing and how calming water births are, but I just don't like the bath in general. I didn't really consider how that might impact laboring in the tub. I don't like the bath in general because I feel like it's so dirty. It's just like this weird thing in my head. It's not like it's that dirty, but I feel like it's gross. And so laboring in the tub with my son did not help me at all. But I love showers. And so for her birth, for her labor, I was in the shower for like an hour and it was lovely. Would super recommend, if you don't like the bath, try the shower. I was in there for a while praying through it, and this is the part of her birth that I remember the most, of these couple hours when we were home in between hospital visits where my husband was sleeping and it was just like me and her, and I didn't even know she was a her. We didn't know her gender until she was born, and it was just like I was just really trying to connect with the Lord and praying to him and just trying to connect with her, just like working with her. And it's just such a beautiful and spiritual experience. Even if you don't have a vaginal birth, you can have extremely touching spiritual labor or birth. If you don't experience labor and you just go straight to a C-section, I totally believe it can still be beautiful and spiritual. So yeah, we did that, and then they were a lot. They were like every 2 minutes for a full minute, and it was that way for about an hour. And I just remember being like, Cole, we gotta go like right now. And he was like, oh, okay. I remember driving to the hospital and just in my head being like, if I am past 4 centimeters, I think I can do this. And then we got to the hospital. We have the same nurse, and she's like, I can tell that you're ready, and I can tell that you're close. So let's get you checked and let's get you admitted. So she checked my cervix. I was 5 centimeters, and I just remember feeling so happy and so at peace when I heard that I was 5 centimeters, because that was the number that I never made it past with my son, but I had already made it to 5 with her after like half of the time. So I was like, surely this is it. Like, I'm just a couple hours away. And that's what my nurse said too. She's like, with how fast you just progressed at home, you're going to be giving birth to a baby in just a few hours. So she admitted me. We went back to the hospital room. That was right around 4:30 in the morning. I got admitted. It was great. It was awesome. I didn't have any interventions up until that point. And then I met my midwife so I'm a rookie, and my camera stopped recording and I didn't know. and now it's been many, many days since the last time I filmed the first part. I was just about to talk about what midwife I was assigned to, or what midwife was at the hospital at the time that I was there. Bree, I think is her name. Pretty sure it was her name. You forget a lot in labor, and names is like one of those things. She ended up being so incredible. She told me that she came from a birth center, so she was like very much into the idea of low intervention birth. So she just kind of popped in and out while I labored there for a couple more hours. I think probably I was laboring for another 4 hours there, but this was like the time where a lot of it is a blur because it was so intense. Like by then I was having contractions every 2 minutes, every 3 minutes. Sometimes Cole said it was like every 1 minute, or just like totally back to back, because I forgot to say earlier, I was on continuous fetal monitoring, which it wasn't the one where they're like, they stick something on your baby's head. It was just the one where it's like external. You do have to have that, I believe, at my hospital if you're going for a VBAC, because one of the first signs of uterine rupture, which is like the risk that you face with VBAC, one of the signs of uterine rupture is that your baby's heart rate starts to, I don't know, show signs of distress. So I was on that. We could see like the strength of the contractions. They were like full, back to back for hours and hours on end. Is like it's really hard to do. I just remember a lot of like me and Cole there, and a lot of him just like helping me through every single contraction, and he's just incredible. I could rave about how fantastic he is in birth. Like I just don't know how I would do it without him with me to help me through every single contraction like he did. After a while, I was like, I need to know if I'm about to give birth, because if I'm not, then I do need something to help with the pain. I asked for a cervical check, and this is kind of where everything went wild, I guess. Went like way out the window. All of the plans went out the window. The midwife came back in. Like everybody thought I was about to give birth. It seemed like I was in transition or very close to transition based on everything other than how dilated I was, which the midwife came in. We waited for my next contraction to stop, and then she did a cervical check, and she said, "You are still 5 centimeters dilated." That's kind of just when I was like, something's wrong. With such intense contractions so close together, it just didn't line up correctly. It didn't really make any sense. And so then she said, "Has anybody ever told you about this bone that's in your pelvis that your baby's head is currently stuck behind?" I said, "You know what? No, nobody has told me about that. Nobody's let me know about that one." It made sense in my head at that point, and I feel like you might be watching this and then you're gonna be like, "Dude, why did you not think of this earlier?" Which I kind of did, but I was born with a genetic disease that causes little bone spurs to grow throughout my body, like in my knees, in my fingers. My fingers are kind of wonky because I have these bones in them. As a kid, I grew up having a lot of surgeries to have these bones taken out, or to have hardware placed in my body to help it grow properly. So that's when I was like, actually, no, nobody's told me about this bone. But then I told her about the genetic disease that I have, and she was like, "Oh, well, then you have one in your pelvis, because this is not supposed to be there, and your baby's head is totally stuck on top of it, and it's not coming down, and I don't think it could come down." So yeah, found out that I have one of those bone growths in my pelvis, which for my 2 pregnancies, my 2 children, both of them have gotten stuck on top of it. And that's why I've never dilated past 5. That's what the midwife said. She's like, "That totally makes sense. They've just never been able to descend past this certain point. So your body's never been able to dilate past 5, but it keeps working harder and harder and harder, as your body should, to try and get this baby down, which ultimately would result in something really, really bad, because they literally cannot descend." So she said, "I'm gonna go grab the physician really quick. I want a second opinion just to be sure. But like, if this is what I think it is, then you've got to get a C-section, like, now." So she went and got the physician. Physician came in, did the same thing, waited for mind you, like all of this and these conversations are happening while I'm in like full on labor. Like we wait for a minute or two for my like really intense contraction to pass, and then I'm like sitting there trying to have a conversation for another minute or two about what's going on. It was so crazy. Physician confirmed that that is what was happening. I had a bone there. She's like, there's literally no way your baby's head is going to make it past that. So yeah, they said, I guess it's C-section time, and C-section forever. Then I gave birth via C-section, which I honestly might make another video just completely dedicated to my C-section, because that I could talk about for quite a long time. They opened me up. It was a surprise gender again. We didn't know her gender. So when they pulled her out, we heard her little scream, and it was so cute. I remember it was such a girly little scream. Like right then and there, I was like, that's a girly scream right there. That's so cute. They hold her up to the little like screen and they say, Dad, what is the baby? And then Cole said, it's a girl. And then Cole and I, of course, had our moment to just kind of like sob and be so relieved and so excited and so happy. So they put her on me and she stopped crying and she fell asleep. And I just remember, like, for the whole time that they were closing me up, I was like, Cole, is she okay? Like, I can't really see her very well because they're like straight here on your chest and you can't obviously like look down and see them perfectly. But I just remember being like, Cole, is she okay? And he's like, yeah, she's just sleeping. Like, she's just really peaceful, which was so stark of a contrast to Owen, because he was screaming from like the moment he was taken out to probably like 6 months old. That boy was just screaming his lungs out. She was not. She was just like so peaceful and so calm, and she just fell right asleep and she just laid on me. And so that was really, really beautiful. And I love thinking back to like that moment that you meet your baby. Is just like your whole entire world changes. Your capacity to love grows. You feel new feelings you've never felt before. It's just crazy. So yeah, I think that's about it. We did the whole like having a newborn thing, and feeding her went great. She like breastfed immediately without any issues at all, which was great and a little bit different than Owen. But that was also because I was learning how to breastfeed. That does not come as naturally as you would think it does. Are you okay? Come here, little lady. She's probably so much bigger in this video now because she's probably like 2 weeks older. Every time I tried to refilm this video, something went wrong or the audio was off. But yeah, that's the birth of our little girl, Ada. I just wanted to share it because I loved hearing birth stories when I was pregnant. It was like my favorite thing to watch. Just how everybody's experience is so, so different. But also I just wanted to share it because I do think it's a positive birth story, even though it's not at all the outcome that I was hoping and praying and working towards. So I just, if any woman is out there that's been through something similar where it's, the birth you had is nothing like the birth you planned for or wanted, I do still think that you can find so much beauty in it, and you can lean into the Lord and trust that like the experience you had is the experience that you had, and that's okay, and you can still find beauty and redemption through it. And it's at the end of the day, you still gave birth to a whole human baby, and that's crazy and awesome. And it doesn't really matter how you did it, because you did it. Just because it's different or not what you wanted doesn't mean that it has to be bad. But if you did have a birth that did not at all go the way that you wanted and you are struggling with that, I also totally think that that's totally valid, and it's really, really hard. And I remember feeling that so much with my son's birth, just feeling like nothing went right and everything went wrong other than like my baby being born healthy, which I should be grateful for. But yeah, I think it's totally valid as well. So anyways, if you're watching this and you're pregnant, I would love to know down below how you want to give birth, what your birth goals and plans are, and I'd love to pray for you. And I'd also love to hear how your birth story went. If you're not pregnant and you did just recently give birth, you gave birth 20 years ago. Birth is amazing. It's just so amazing, and I want to hear all of it. So let me know in the comments if you are comfortable with doing that or if you'd like prayer. And thanks so much for watching. Thanks. Yeah, it means a lot to me that you watched and that you care to hear how the birth of this little baby girl went. So yeah, until next time, goodbye. Bye-bye, camera. Oh, you're so big now. You're so big now.